Hello, everybody. First thing I wanted to say was that a lot of resources that I'm talking about today are linked to from the description of this session, and then I just today added two more. And one of them is more of a broader introduction to the general ideas going on here. But I want to give about 4 or 5 demos, so I'm going to let people read that whenever you want. So the first, all of these, maybe I should at least give a tiny bit of bigger background before I go into the demos. So the idea is that I have a snap block for talking to all different kinds of language models like GPT and Cohere and other ones. And I've got 5 examples of what one could do with this, because you could always chat to these things. But as you'll see, in a lot of applications, you need to repeatedly ask different questions, put it together, then ask a different question, so it's not straightforward to use it manually in some sense. Okay, so the first one is setting up conversations between personas. And almost everything here is relying on this block that where you put in some text, you could say which of 15, 20 different models, and almost all of them fortunately require an API key, but in some cases there's free available ones, or for the really good ones, at least you get a few months of essentially free, and then you'll have to pay, I guess. And then there's lots of options, and that's important too. So the basic idea is that if you tell it something, the prompt you're going to give it starts off with something like this one for one of the personas, in this case, an elephant, or no, Mount Everest, sorry. So, so you're saying that you're a knowledgeable, helpful model, and you're talking English, and you're going to try your best to answer questions, and you're nice and truthful. And I don't know why I switched to a different example, which is the elephant. But you also, besides setting up the context, you want to give it a few examples. So this is just a little example of some conversations. And here's the 10 that are there, but as you'll see, it's really quick and easy to make new ones. So that's the overview. So here's the Snap program. And it goes through first, which engine do you want, which personas, and so on. So let's just run it. And it does work with speech, but I'm not going to do that. And just for make it impressive, I'll use the very best model that actually costs, I think, 3 cents for every 1,000, or 4 cents for every 1,000 words, or something. It's not very much, but it is something. So let's suppose we want, I don't know, Galileo to talk to Socrates, but also to talk to me. And then I'll say I'm done. Oh, right. So that wasn't very important. Basically, it shows the different.
I'm eager to share my knowledge and learn from our discussions. Let's talk about the mysteries of the universe and the laws that govern it.
So I think Socrates should respond to that now.
Hello, Galileo. It's a pleasure to have a conversation with one of the great minds of science. You have certainly contributed much to our understanding of the universe.
But now you would see a picture of me if the camera wasn't being used by Zoom. But if I say, let's talk about gravity or something, I could be the third person in this conversation. And
gravity is a force that attracts 2 objects towards each other. The more mass an object has, the stronger its gravitational pull.
I'm going to stop this because I want to show so many different things, but I also want to give a sense of how you do this. So first off, let's look at Galileo. Where is he? Here he is. So you set up the general thing, you give a few examples of questions to him, and this just sets up these sprite variables so that each character has a little bit of information about them, but it's very brief like that. But the main thing is how you're going to have the personas talk to each other. Sorry, so there's a lot of variables in all this. You could decide how many times back and forth, how creative they should be, or how kind of strict they should be, and it gets a bit complicated because I want to have them all taking turns in different ways, and then keep a log of everything so you could get a nice little description of the whole conversation afterwards and the whole. But there's another thing that's important for something like this, and this is common for many of these, is that if the conversation starts to get a bit long, it's too big a prompt for many of these things. So what you also have to do is ask the language model, could you summarize the conversation so far? And then you include that in the prompt, and then you include, as it says here, maybe the last 3 exchanges. So it knows the general framework, knows the most recent context, and that's how the conversation proceeds. And besides famous people and historical people, and it's really fun to talk to elephants and Mount Everest. You could say, how much do you weigh, who are your neighbors, that kind of stuff. But you could also create characters that just have a personality, one that's really curious, or one that's always contrarian and is always arguing with you. And you could be one of the participants or not, depending on what you want. So that's one of 5 demos I wanted to talk about. Sorry, this one, zooming in a bit. So here, this is one that's a bit similar, but it's trying to set up debates. And you set up a prompt saying, here's you're the affirmative team, and here's the proposition, come up with some arguments, and then you do it, you collect that, then you collect the one for the opposing team, but then you ask for rebuttals. So you're putting together not just the thing, but you're telling it, this is what the opponent said, how are you going to rebut it? And then can you come up with some new arguments, and can you summarize things? So let's get a demo of this. And what I discovered earlier today is that it's kind of fun to have a topic that's kind of relevant to the conference. So I could say, Snap programming language is the best in the. So the model's being prompted for arguments in favor. And again, it's actually much faster to use the little stupider models, but I wanted to give you, a sense of what the really smart ones is. It's visual and direct out, it makes a great tool for teaching, it's flexible, it encourages creativity, and it's free and open source. So now let's see what the opposition says. It's got limited scope, it's not as versatile as other languages. It's got a limited community and resources. Well, that's true relative to Python or JavaScript or something. It's not an industry standard, and they don't think it's efficient because it's an interpreted language. So here's the response. While it's true that, it was designed for educational purpose, this doesn't really limit its versatility. It's a high-level language. The limited community, the size of the community doesn't necessarily correlate with the quality, and not an industry standard. So they're trying to rebut each one of these things. And then we'll see a rebuttal to the, or maybe this is the rebuttal. Now it's getting to say, well, could you come up with some new arguments? Remember, I had 4 to start with. And now it's coming up with new arguments why Snap is so wonderful. It's accessible, it's got educational value, community support, and so on. And then the negative team came up with more negative ones, that it's web-based, so it can't work on standalone things, not suitable for advanced stuff, it's limited performance, which isn't very different. And there's no real-world application. But here is another nice thing, is that the affirmative team summarizes that here's the summary of what it was arguing for, and here's what the negative team. And then it says, just look at the debate variable. So if we look at the debate variable, it's got the entire thing, and you could export it and, share it with people. Okay, so let me move on. The next one is one where you ask it to generate a story, and you also ask it to come up with prompts to give to text to image programs. And this gets, and then the trickier thing was actually with that part of, well, the first part was interesting in that it relied on a feature that's actually going away, a specialized feature. The more newer models more generally could do this, which is you could take some response and give some criticism and say, edit this like paragraph of the story, taking into account this criticism, and it comes up with a rewrite of it. And actually, the latest versions could just do this without using a specialized one, but this relies on a bit of a specialized one. So I experimented with this using 15 stories that were in a Neil Gaiman book, where this character was going crazy because he kept coming up with crazy ideas for stories. I should, as I'm doing it, I'll explain too that getting the illustrations was tricky, because you'd say, okay, for this paragraph, what would be a good illustration? What should the mood be? What should the point of view be? What should the medium be? And then you put it all together and ask it to make a prompt for, and then you hand it off to a different program. So if somebody would just type a number between 1 and 18, we'll look at one of these examples. Whoever does it first, I'll show you. I'll put 17. Okay, shark's teeth soup. Oh, yeah, push there. Why isn't it showing up? Let's just do it this way. Yeah. Open in a new tab. There we go. So all the illustrations, as a matter of fact, if I move this up, I think, yeah, the comments on these slides, even the font was suggested, and what was the prompt that it suggested for the opening thing. And then the story, once upon a time, the little girl loved to swim in the ocean, and she loved to, and she was excited to find a treasure, and then it turns out to be shark's teeth and so on. So you could read these, but for each one, you could learn about the what was the prompts and how did it come up with these things. But also if you do it yourself, you could see the history of the, it came up with this paragraph, then it suggested changes, and you picked the third change and rewrote it this way. So you get the whole rewriting history. All right, let's move on. What's this one? Oh yeah, this is the code itself, but it takes a while, so we're not going to do it. So this is one in which the original thought was to control a logo of a little tiny robot by talking to it. But then I got into this whole other question of, do these models have any sense of direction? So you could read more about how it works, but let's just try it right here. So I'll type the commands, and I'll say, walk southwest 50 steps. It's kind of cooler when you use the voice. So it actually noticed that wasn't really southwest. So I could say that, do it again because I was wrong, and then we'll try. Anyways, don't worry about that. We're happy with that, because you can do a lot more things. You could say, go south, zigzag or something. And it didn't go south. I don't know. Don't worry about the direction so much. And then I could say, draw, where's my, I have to say this, sorry. Draw a red star. And I could say, bigger pen with, doesn't that even be good English or something? It didn't catch it all. But anyways, and then what's cool too is that you could then say, click this, and you actually get the whole snap program. The comment was, walk this way, and it did this, and then you said, make a zigzag and repeat it 4 times doing this. And so it's pretty cool that you could create movement turtle kind of programs in just by talking to it. And this one started with the fact that notice that if you just type this to a model, it'll respond, and you say, oh, and then you say X moves like this, 0 moves like this. It'll actually come back and make legal moves. So I thought it'd be fun to make a program that worked like this. So if I put my X here or something, then it's just sending the text of the thing. Oh no, something went wrong. Well, that's what happens with demos. This was working earlier today, but probably now I'm using a good, I don't know, we could try seeing if the very best model works any better. So it also, every time it's also looking at the board saying, is the game over or somebody won? So I actually did a bit of statistics as to how, but it generally doesn't play very well, but it almost never makes an illegal move. But I'm not quite sure why it's being so slow, and I don't have much time. The last thing I wanted to point out was that I have several different AI resources, including ones having to do with machine learning and images and text and poses, all those things. But this is the one about language, and there's different sections about different kinds of things, question answering and image generation. But here's the text ones, and these are just the building blocks. These are the models, the blocks that are used to do this. And the very last thing I wanted to say is, after doing all of this, I started to have second thoughts when I started doing experiments a few months ago, just saying in English in a conversation with ChatGPT, saying, oh, I'd like a program that would generate, that I could have simulate personas. And it says, well, how about this little JavaScript code? And I'd copy it. And then I'd say, but I wanted to have, multiple people being able to talk to each other. And then it comes up with some additional JavaScript. So what threw me off was the fact that I can create these things just by having a little conversation. It's kind of like pair programming, except I'm my partner is this AI program. And then the last thing here we'll talk about for those that come on Thursday is that what this means, the fact that you could build these programs, what it means for block-based languages, because they could give some support for block-based language, but nowhere near as much as for text. So that was everything I wanted to say, but remember that all these things you could play with yourself, except that almost all of them require an API key. But like I said, for many of these places, you could just go to the company and ask for a key, and it'll work for a few months for free. Good. Are there questions? I'm looking at the